Thank you. Okay, hi everyone.
We just lost you. Okay. Can everyone hear me? This is Marina. I think we just lost Lorene. I'm going to try to get her back. Can everyone hear me? Text in the chat, please, if you can hear me. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, great. Yes. Okay. That's great. I'm just contacting Lorene now to see if I can get her back.
I'm here. I accidentally clicked myself out. I'm coming back here.
Okay, good. All right. All right. So did everybody hear that? There we go. She's back.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Yeah, I didn't have the microphone on. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, just let me know if you can hear me. Good. Because we had this all set up, and then a screen popped up, and I thought I was clicking that screen, and I actually clicked the little X that took me right out of the whole system. So, but anyway, yay, everybody can hear me, except for Natalie. I don't know why you can't hear me, Natalie. Sorry. Sometimes it's because of your computer and your browser. Sometimes the browsers are not as good. So just check your sound on your computer.
Diane can't hear you either.
Yeah, well, there's too many yeses. So when it's on our end, there's a whole pile of no's.
All right.
That's the only way we can tell. Just check your sound, Melody. Okay, Diana's good now. All right. Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Marina Silverio, and she's going to be watching the chat while I'm doing the presentation. And we're going to save all the questions till the end, but if there's any technical issues, she'll throw some ideas at you or whatever, and she'll let me know if anything happens to the sound or anything like that. Okay, so thank you, Marina, for joining us. And she's going to tell us her story, which is kind of interesting, which ties into all this later on in the presentation. So I'm just going to call up the PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I can't see the chat. I thought I could, but for some reason on this version, I can't see the chat. So you can just keep watching that and answer anything that may come up or let me know anything. Okay. I'm going to start. So welcome everyone. I'm glad you could join us today. And we're also going to be talking about food and food issues. So this is our agenda for the next hour. I'm going to do a short introduction, and then I'm going to discuss why we're having food issues. I'm going to talk about some factors for gut health, and then what we should do. So, I'm just like you and probably all of your clients. I have family issues. I deal with the same kind of stresses that you probably deal with and your clients are dealing with. And one of the things that motivated me to get into this industry is watching what other people were going through, plus my own issues and things like that. And I'm quite sure that's very similar for all of you as well. And of course, that led me to becoming a holistic nutritionist. And I've been a teacher at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition since, the year 2000. So it's just quite a long time. It's just kind of hard for me to believe. I'm also a director for CanPro, which is a professional association that regulates holistic nutritionists. And again, all of the work that I've done with in this regard is because I really do believe in what we do as holistic nutrition professionals. And it doesn't matter if we're holistic nutritionists or we're health coaches or we're in the fitness industry or, whatever we're doing to help people have a better way of living and being healthier and feeling better. I think this is really worthwhile. And so I like to do whatever I can to, help more people access people in the wellness profession. I've also been a food professional for 25 years, and that gives me a really unique perspective on food because I can understand it from the food science point of view. One of the things that I found when I went to school is there's assumptions made about food that really, if you understood how food works or how food ages or how food rots, if you want to look at it that way, um, or how food ferments, it really doesn't mean what a lot of people think it means. So that's given me a lot of help with trying to come up with options for clients over the years. I had a chronic condition of endometriosis, and that is what led me to learn more about the gut. And it's really the work that I did on my gut that solved my endometriosis problem. And even though we're talking about food issues, what we're going to be talking about is how every health condition is connected to the gut. And you can't assume that you don't have a gut issue just because you don't have food issues. I'm one who I didn't have any food sensitivities. I don't have any food allergies. That was never my issue, but I definitely had a gut problem. So there's some misinformation about the gut and how it affects people differently. And tonight we're talking about how it affects them with food. But we could take that same conversation and talk about any other condition we wanted to pick. All of this work led me to create the Healthy Gut program and the Healthy Hormone program and the Simply Fermentation online workshop for practitioners, which is quite a mouthful. And the reason I did that is because I've spent years reading research and I was discovering all kinds of really good, usable information that is not what we is being talked about or what we have learned. And it could be very, very useful to us as practitioners, and I wanted to share it. So that's why I came up with these programs. And I will be talking about the Healthy Gut program at the end of this presentation for anybody who's interested. But in the meantime, I'm going to get to what we are going to be talking about tonight, which is food issues. So as practitioners, we've seen how many different issues and variations of issues clients have. And I'm, even today, after all these years, I'm still amazed at how many things can go wrong in the body, and people have conditions I've never heard of. And, it really does make me, scratch my head, so to speak, right? And sometimes we have our go-to protocols. We have things that we typically do, and we start off doing that, and we see where that takes us. And sometimes it works, and often it doesn't. And so that's why we end up scratching our heads. And what is frustrating, and I'm sure it's frustrating for me, and I'm sure it's frustrating for you as well, it makes you feel like you may not know enough. So my goal tonight is to share some of this new information in hopes of giving you a new perspective and opening up more options for you. So the good news is we're not the only ones scratching our heads. MDs and other practitioners are doing it as well. And even though diagnostic tools have improved immensely over the last 10, 20 years, which can tell us sort of what things are out of balance from time to time. It doesn't tell us everything, but it can tell us quite a bit. It doesn't mean that whatever solutions, it doesn't matter if we're talking about doctors or naturopaths or chiropractors, doesn't mean the solutions to the health issues are going to work. So there's still a lot of hit and miss when it comes to working with clients. And they, just like us, they have no way of knowing if a treatment is going to work for an individual. And that makes it hard for the client. Now, our job, of course, is to work with food. And we live in an era where food is an easy scapegoat. So we have a lot of anecdotal information that is presented to us as fact about specific foods. And it's based on different practitioners or people, it depends. Sometimes it's a person who's just had a health experience and done some things and they write a book, or sometimes it's an MD or an ND or, you know, some other professional who's written a book or come up with a theory or whatever. And they basically are, you know, looking at their clients, and then their client takes out a specific food that they suggest, and then the client feels better, and then they blame the problem on the food. And there's really no one to defend the food, and the reason I wanted to discuss this is because it's really important that we understand that if it's not the food's fault, we have to find out what is behind what's going on with them. And so there's a statistic, and this is an actual accurate statistic, and I often talk about this when I teach nutritional literature research. And the statistic is this, that uh, when ice cream sales go up, murder rates go up. Or conversely, when murder rates go up, ice cream sales go up. And if you look at those two statistics by themselves, it implies that people either eat ice cream and go out and commit murder, or after someone commits murder, they go out and celebrate by having ice cream. But what is missing from that statistic is that there's a confounding variable, and that's a research term, right? So the confounding variable is the weather's nice, so people tend to eat more ice cream when the weather is nice, and people tend to go outside more and be around other people and get into arguments when the weather's nice too. So that's a confounding variable. And so we have the same thing when we see this sort of this connection where someone's eating a food, they stop eating the food, and a symptom goes away, that the food wasn't really, there's a confounding variable that is making the food have that reaction in the person. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But the important thing is to remember is that we're the ones who have to defend food. Because if we don't, first of all, more and more foods are being taken out. More and more foods are being labeled bad. Good foods, good whole foods with lots of nutrients in them. Foods that have been around for hundreds of years. And if we don't defend this and we don't come up with solutions to this, these are our tools. These are the tools that we work with to help clients. And if we don't defend food, nobody else is going to. There's no big lobby group for blueberries, and there's no big lobby group for salmon. There's no big lobby group for any specific food. So we want to help our clients more effectively, and we need to have more knowledge about how we can help them with food, or soon they won't be eating anything. And I'm sure you've had some clients, or you know of some people who just go on to develop more and more food issues. Despite taking foods out of their diet, they just develop new problems with new foods. Okay, so it really doesn't matter what the food is. We're not supposed to have an issue with any food. So in a perfect world, we can break down every food to its smallest constituent part. So that's amino acids, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, fiber, fatty acids, glucose molecules, whatever. And we can absorb these elements that are in the food that are useful. And we can deactivate or remove those elements in a food that are not helpful. And that's what we should be able to do. And there should be no qualifications, no asterisks, no footnotes, no agendas. This is what we're supposed to be able to do. So the question then becomes, why can't we? I'm just going to define these as we're using them in tonight's presentation, even though people use these terms kind of loosely, and they don't always mean the same thing when different people are using it. So people can have food sensitivities, and this is also called food intolerance. It's due to a lack of digestive enzymes and good gut bacteria. People can have food intolerance, which is also called food sensitivity, and that's where the confusing part comes in. Now, this is due to IgG antibodies being formed when they have undigested food particles going through into the bloodstream through leaky gut, and the immune system attacks the food particle and forms an antibody. This is also due to lack of good bacteria as a cause, and as a result of that cause, there's something called immune tolerance, which they also lack, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then food allergy, the traditional type of food allergy where you go to the doctor and get the scratch test, this is where the immune system attacks the substance, whatever it is, to form IgE antibodies. This is also due to lack of good bacteria and immune tolerance. So what is immune tolerance? Well, first of all, it refers to the lack of a reaction by the immune system to a substance or body tissue. So in other words, if you have immune tolerance to food, you don't react to the food. If you have immune tolerance to your body tissue, you don't react to body tissue. And say, this is what's happening with autoimmunity. They're reacting to their own body tissue. So they've lost immune tolerance. And babies in the womb have immune tolerance naturally. So do our gut microflora. But everything else must be given immune tolerance, and this is controlled by the gut microflora. And if we didn't have the gut microflora, we would be experiencing an immune reaction to everything we're exposed to. So just think about that when you're thinking about how you have one food or maybe a couple of food or one, maybe it's an airborne allergen or something like that. It could be a lot worse. So you've lost immune tolerance to those couple of things, but you haven't lost immune tolerance to everything. And as I mentioned, we have seen people who they keep losing and more immune tolerance to things, and they just get sicker and sicker and sicker. So immune tolerance is all about the role of T cells. And T cells are made by your thymus, and there's 3 types that we are going to talk about. One is reactive self-antigen T cells, one is naive T cells, and the other is regulatory T cells. And your naive T cells make the other 2. So you make those first, and then they're converted to the other 2. And the reactive self-antigen T cells are the ones that have the potential to be involved with allergy. They also are the ones that are involved with autoimmunity as well. And the regulatory T cells, they exist as a very distinct type of T cell. So what they do is they can modulate the immune system and maintain tolerance despite the presence of self-antigen T cells. They also promote anti-inflammatory cytokine, which is going to suppress self-antigen T cell activity. And they are produced in higher numbers to enable control and to protect immune tolerance by suppressing these self-reactive T cells. So what this means is, I don't know how many of you have had IgG testing done. So you get IgG testing done, and it shows that you have IgG antibodies to all of these different foods. And a lot of them are low levels, some are high. And what they tell you is that with the higher ones, those are more likely to be what you're reacting to. But you're probably scratching your head going, why do I have these antibodies to these other substances? I don't have any problem with these. I don't react to them in any way. Well, what IgG testing doesn't tell you is how many T regulatory cells you have and how well they are working, because you could even have a high amount of IgG antibodies, but if you have more T regulatory cells to counter that, you're not going to have any reaction at all. And it's unfortunate, we can pinpoint the antibodies, but we don't have a test to tell us how many T regulatory cells we have. But that's the role they play. They can blunt and block the reaction of any antibody that forms, because this is the role they play, and that's how they maintain immune tolerance. And studies have shown that people with lower levels of T regulatory cells are more prone to allergy, and the same is true for autoimmunity as well. They also promote the production of IL-10, which is an anti-inflammatory cytokine, and this can suppress allergic inflammation and reaction. There's also another substance that we produce, and that is related to our gut bacteria, called TGF-beta, and it is involved in promoting T regulatory cells and, of course, lowering the immune response to allergies. But what's the gut connection? Well, T regulatory cells are produced in the intestine from naive T cells. So after the thymus makes the naive T cells, they make their way to the intestines, and from there they're converted to T regulatory cells. And the way that this works is we have bacteria in our colon, bifidus bacteria. They like to eat resistant starch, which is found in grains and legumes and corn and things like that. And when they eat the resistant starch, they produce short-chain fatty acids. And one particular short-chain fatty acid named butyrate, which, by the way, is also in butter, actually helps produce the regulatory T cells. So this is what it means when it says promotes metabolites butyrate is a metabolite that is made by our good gut bacteria in the colon, and in doing that, it helps us produce more T regulatory cells. And having sufficient good bacteria is the key to maintaining a normal response because it's going to promote the production of these T regulatory cells. So the maintenance of immune homeostasis by the gut is the key to preventing or resolving allergies. So this is going to affect the IgE allergies, but it's also going to affect IgG antibodies as well. And technically, the world at large does not call those allergies. They call them intolerances or sensitivities. But they're both antibodies and they're both immune reactions. Other advantages of immune tolerance, studies have shown that good immune tolerance also means you have a better ability to fight pathogens. Your microbiome is going to be far more robust and healthy. You'll have increased nutrient absorption, and you'll have a better gut-brain connection. And there'll be less ability for pathogens to colonize in the body and in the gastrointestinal system. So I like to always show this little diagram because it's a good visual to sort of get us to picture what our gut should look like if it's healthy. And here you have the lovely little purple intestinal wall lining cells, and they're nicely, tightly together, and they're plump and they look healthy. And then you've got all those blue dots, which represents the good bacteria, and they just line up against the intestinal wall lining. And then all those red splotchy things represent either bad bacteria, parasites, yeast, undigested food particles, anything that, toxins of any kind, anything that if they got near the intestinal wall lining, we would be unhappy campers, so it would set off inflammatory reactions, it would damage the lining. And as you can see, the good bacteria is acting like the guards in front of a fort, and they're guarding the intestinal wall lining. When you have dysbiosis, it looks more like this. And so now you can see there's sections removed and the pathogens have an access to the gut lining. But what I'd also like to point out, because this is what makes everything so difficult for us to assess a given client, is you can see there's sections there that are fine. They've got plenty of good bacteria, and then you see there's sections where gut bacteria is missing. And we never know how much of an intestinal wall lining, because remember, it's very long, it's many feet. We don't know where it's damaged and how much of it is damaged, and there's going to be more reactions the more it is damaged, and there's going to be less reactions when it's only minorly maybe damaged in one little small area. So this is something we don't know, and this makes it difficult because we really don't know what the client is dealing with. Okay, so in terms of food sensitivity and intolerance, now, all food issues, so anybody who's having a reaction to a food, it's going to be an inflammatory reaction. But there's no food that is inflammatory. Inflammation is a product of lack of good gut bacteria. So your good gut bacteria regulates inflammation in the gut and throughout the body. And of course, bad bacteria, toxins, excess yeast, viruses, these all promote inflammation in the gut and throughout the body as well. So the bottom line here, there is no such thing as an inflammatory food. The inflammation belongs to the person, not the food. And dysbiosis promotes inflammatory reactions to foods, and it's the foods generally with the large protein, fat, and carbohydrate molecules that take longer to digest that generally cause reactions when there is an issue, just because there's more opportunity for an inflammatory reaction to occur. We also have issues with foods that have certain chemicals naturally occurring. So we are all aware of what a phytonutrient is, but a phytonutrient is also called a phytochemical. And there are two types of phytochemicals. There are phytochemicals that are good for us, which is what we call phytonutrients. But then there's also phytochemicals that are not nice to us. So for example, the solanine that's in the nightshade family, or the salicylates that are in the salicylate foods, those are apples and plums and peaches and things like that. So what's supposed to happen with all phytochemicals, whether they're good for us or bad for us, the same process happens. You eat the foods make their way into the gut bacteria then metabolizes all the phytochemicals, whatever they are. If they are something that's really beneficial to us, they usually metabolize it into a new metabolite that is actually even more beneficial for us. And if it's something that is not ideal for us or that our body does not like, then the gut bacteria takes that chemical and it either neutralizes it or converts it to something more beneficial. Sometimes that happens. Or it forces it to be detoxed out. So we have the capability of detoxing chemicals, not just naturally occurring ones in food, but they're also finding this with mercury and BPA and other things that are coming in through our foods that are not ideal for us. Our good gut bacteria, when we have sufficient, is capable of detoxification. And what this means, A, it saves our liver some work, and B, it means it's never entering into the bloodstream, which is a really, really good thing. So I like to talk about dairy because of all the foods out there, there's this assumption that dairy is inflammatory, even though there's absolutely nothing scientifically that will confirm this. And there's many, many studies that say the exact opposite. And this is an example of how people make an assumption because they have a client who eats dairy, that they stop eating the dairy and a symptom goes away. So therefore the dairy was causing the problem and the inflammation. But that's not how research works, and that's not how we learn how things work. So there has been a number of studies looking at the potential of dairy to be inflammatory. This is just one example. It's a meta-analysis study of seven different studies, all with people. And these are all people who consumed a high amount of dairy. And what they found was that the dairy lowered these three inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and TNF-alpha. They found that in 3 of the studies, and then in the other 4 studies, they found that dairy was neutral. I've also seen a meta-analysis study of 50 different studies, all looking at the same thing, inflammation potential of dairy, and they concluded that the only people who have inflammation as a result of having dairy are people who have an allergy to dairy. And then there's another study that's of 8 randomized control studies. So there's a lot of studies out there, and none of them have found anything about dairy itself that's the least bit inflammatory. So once again, it's the inflammation belongs to the person, not the food. Okay, so when we're talking about allergy and intolerance and sensitivity, it's the food's not the issue. So no food is more susceptible to being an allergy or sensitivity than any other food. And there's 3 factors you have to consider. One is, of course, dysbiosis, lack of good bacteria. This is the main cause. And if this is not present, you don't have to worry about the other 2 factors. So that's going to be first and foremost. The second one, of course, is loss of immune tolerance when we're talking about IgE and IgG antibodies. And then there's the frequency of consumption, because obviously the more you consume something, especially if you don't have the right bacteria level to digest that specific food, or there's immune tolerance lost to that food, you're going to have more and more reactions. But frequency of consumption also affects whether or not you have enough enzymes to digest. So some people's sensitivities, and this would be the first use of the word sensitivity that I described at the beginning, is more due to lack of digestive enzymes, but it's not necessarily pancreatic enzymes. So you have brush border enzymes that help digest casein and gluten and cellulase in vegetables, and they can produce lactase enzymes. And so the brush border enzymes are very important, and they are regulated by gut bacteria, plus they can also be harmed when the intestinal wall lining is damaged. It can also include pancreatic enzymes, because if you're stressed a lot and your blood sugar is swinging up and down and your pancreas is working very hard trying to produce insulin and regulate glucose and some of the other stresses we put on our pancreas, you might not produce enough pancreatic enzymes. And of course, our gut bacteria produces a lot of specialty enzymes that help us to digest specific foods. Now, our gut microbes are interacting with our immune system constantly. And in order for them to stay in our intestinal system, the immune system has to be able to recognize them as foreign but not pathogenic. So this is why they don't attack our good microbes. And the immune system constantly tests the microbes using cells located in the intestinal wall lining. So it's kind of like they give them a little workout. And they use secretory IgA cells in the intestinal wall lining to sort of test the microbes and see what the reaction is. And this sort of keeps them talking to each other nonstop. And there's many ways in which the gut microbes can affect immune response. So they like to study germ-free mice, and so they make them germ-free. And then what they have found is that mice that are germ-free have a lower number of immune cells than normal mice. And when they introduce bacteria into young mice, they quickly gain their immune cells back to be the same as normal mice. But what they've also found is when they do this to adult germ-free mice, they do not gain their immune cells back. And so this means we've got a window of opportunity. If we don't get the best start in life as children, we've got an opportunity to sort of counter that if we do the right strategies. But once we're an adult, we may not be able to build up the immune system to be as strong as it needs to be as an adult. Now, that doesn't mean it's game over for the adult. That just means you have to use other strategies that are supportive of immune function and gut health in order to help them cope with the fact that they naturally don't have the best immune system. Now, they don't know all that there is to know about the relationship between microbes and the immune system. This is an ongoing area of research, and we're going to be learning more and more about this in the years to come. Dysbiosis, you've got a number of factors playing a role when you have dysbiosis. So you've got bad bacteria, and it produces a toxin called LPS, lipopolysaccharides. This has been linked to all kinds of neurological problems, including Alzheimer's, autism, Parkinson's disease, liver disease. It is inflammatory. It's not a nice toxin at all. Of course, we know all about excess yeast producing toxins like acetaldehyde. And then, of course, we also have naturally occurring funguses and molds that can produce aflatoxins. And these can be on our food, or they can be something that it naturally is in our gut, because we do have fungus and such in our gut as well. And all of these can cause inflammation. By the way, not all fungus is bad for you, and not all yeast is bad for you. There's a lot of beneficial yeasts and beneficial funguses too. But the ones that aren't so nice, they can cause inflammation, they can impair digestion, and this can cause reactions to food. And one of the things that I'd like you to consider, because this is something we do not know. So when you eat foods that feed good bacteria, many of those foods also feed bad bacteria, and some of them even feed yeast. But when good bacteria is in control and has the numbers, then the bad bacteria is still getting fed because they still live there. They're just in small numbers and they're kept in check by the good bacteria. So when you don't have sufficient good bacteria, the bad bacteria is getting fed with the food that you eat. And this could be producing the excess of these toxins like LPS. And that's what the reaction to the food could be, not anything to do with the food. The food was just feeding bad bacteria. It produced more LPS. You had more reaction. And this is something they don't know. They don't exactly know the total timeline and progression for different reactions that we might have in our gastrointestinal system, especially when we eat. But what we do know is that all of these toxins are supposed to be countered by our good gut bacteria, because they actually regulate all of these reactions and they regulate all of these organisms. And so if they have the numbers and they're in control, we don't react. Okay, so I wanted to show you this because this gives you even a better picture of what our gut lining can look like. And this is a healthy gut lining, and you see a little gray squiggles and peachy colored squiggles. Those are the good bacteria. You see how they're just coating the top of the lining, and if you look to the right there, you can see them down the side of the cells. They're all over the cells. And what you see going on here is that the junctions are closed, so they're nice and tight together, and toxins are being detoxified, and so everything is working well and everything's being protected. But this is what we mean when we say leaky gut. So again, you can see how atrophied this looks, and you can see there's no good bacteria there, and you can see yeast. That white stuff is yeast, and you can see parasites and toxins, and there's big gaps between the cells, and it looks very unhealthy. It's not plump and pink. And again, we don't know how much of anyone's gut, if they have leaky gut, looks like this. It could just be one section, it could be several sections. We don't know. So there are benefits to leaky gut in the idea that it opens and it closes. So it does this on a regular basis for good reasons. So it's when the gut opens, it's triggered by a chemical called zonulin, and this allows fluids to flood the intestines, and the role of this is to help flush out toxins and pathogens. When you get diarrhea, it's because zonulin opened up the gut and fluids from your body were allowed to flood into the intestines and allow you to really quickly get pathogens that are in the gastrointestinal system out of you. And by doing this, obviously, they're not going to cause you any more problem. And this is why you have to worry about being dehydrated when you have diarrhea, because the fluids have left the body to go into the intestinal tract. Aflatoxins that are on molds and things like that, they can also trigger zonulin release because, again, the gut wants to open, allow fluids to come out, and flush out the aflatoxin. So this opening of the gut is not a bad thing. But during this process, that temporary time that it's open, toxins and food particles can slip in, and there will be antibodies formed to them. The immune system will go after them. But the amount of the exposure is quite low. And this is where you're going to get some IgG antibodies forming. But in most people, it's not enough to trigger reactions because, again, we have to take into consideration the T regulatory cells that are preventing any kind of antibody from reacting. It's all about numbers. And so the issue is when you have a prolonged open gut that allows for more opportunity for IgG antibodies, this is what's going to increase reactions. So again, just the fact that the gut opens and closes is not a big deal. It's, does it stay open? And one of the things that they now know is our gut microflora helps regulate this intestinal barrier function, or the opening and closing of the gut. And you can see what it says here. It says alterations in gut microbiota, dysbiosis, have been linked to recent increased expression of obesity, allergy, autoimmunity, functional inflammatory disorders such as IBS and IBD. And then what they go on to review is the evidence supporting a role of the gut microbiota in regulating intestinal barrier function. So in other words, in regulating leaky gut. And then this brings me to my other favorite topic, gluten. So gluten gets a really bad rap, and I like to talk about this study because it makes a really good point. So they took 10 healthy adults and they put them on a gluten-free diet for 1 month. And then they analyzed their colon bacteria before and after. And what they found was that their good bacteria had decreased and their bad bacteria had a parallel increase. And they also found they had suppressed immune function. So this is what happened. So they take people who don't have a problem with, it was probably wheat they took them off of. Wheat contains something called resistant starch. Resistant starch is consumed by bifidus bacteria and produces short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids help our immune system function at its peak. So they probably put them onto a typical gluten-free diet, which would be starchy foods with gums and sugar and things like that. They didn't substitute good quality gluten-free grains or other foods that would have resistant starch in it. And so the reason I like this study is because, first of all, we shouldn't assume that A, gluten's a problem. B, we shouldn't assume that if we're going to take them off gluten, we better make sure we're putting other foods in that can fulfill the role that wheat or gluten grains fulfill for our gut, or else we might be causing more problems than we're solving. So it's always important that we never throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that this is why we don't want to label any particular food good or bad. We just want to, figure out what's best for the client. Now, the key here is to understand when someone is having an issue with gluten as to why they're having the gluten instead of just blaming gluten, because gluten by itself is actually quite good for you. It helps promote growth of cells, and again, this is never talked about, but it's been known as that for generations, and then all of a sudden, people are saying it's bad and it's this and it's that, and it's not that at all. It's about what the person can do and if the person can digest it. And point in case is that celiacs and others with gluten issues, they go on to develop other more serious conditions even when they pull the gluten out. Celiacs often have other autoimmune conditions develop, and they're at high risk for developing cancer. So if gluten was their issue, there's obviously more going on because they removed the gluten and they still have problems. And what's really interesting is that celiacs can consume fully fermented sourdough bread. So I know you probably don't know a lot about sourdough bread, unless you bake it. And what you need to know is, so you've got this starter and it's fully fermented. So what that means is that they fermented the grain for a period of time so that the gluten's broken down, most of the carbohydrate is broken down, and then to make it into bread, they fold in fresh flour. This takes the sour taste out, and so when you buy sourdough bread at wherever you buy it, you're getting one that has some fully fermented sourdough plus fresh flour, which isn't as fermented. That they have not fed to celiacs. What they have fed is the really sour, so fully fermented sourdough would be very sour, and they don't have any reaction to it at all. They've also done a study where they took that sourdough starter, and instead of putting in gluten flours for the fresh flour, they put in gluten-free flours, and they could digest that as well. So what does this mean? It means, so when you are fermenting grains, it's good bacteria and yeasts are fermenting the grain, and this is what's breaking it down and making it so much more digestible. And by the way, normal sourdough bread is very digestible. It's more digestible than sprouted bread or anything like that, for those who aren't celiac. But for people who are celiac, obviously that fresh flour is a bit problematic for them. But what this is telling us, you have the same strains of bacteria. They're slightly different because they're human versions, they're not plant versions of the strains, but you have the same type of strains of yeast and bacteria in your gut. If you have the right amount, you could break that gluten down too. And so when you have somebody who's having a reaction to gluten, they don't have those strains to break down that gluten, and that's why they're having issues. One of the things that helps you break down gluten is an enzyme called dipeptyl peptidase 4, or DPP4. And this is a brush border enzyme that aids the breakdown of gluten. And celiacs have low levels, and this could be a genetic thing. And low levels have also been indicated in other health conditions like dermatitis, cancer, diabetes type 2. But what's really interesting is that specific strains actually have signals that tell the brush border enzymes to make DPP4. So L. helveticus, L. acidophilus, L. rhamnosus, and bifidobacterium, these all help us make DPP4. And by the way, you can buy DPP4 as a supplement as well, because you can buy anything as a supplement. And they're also, these strains are associated with digesting exorphins as well. DPP4 is also associated with the digestion of casein. But what's also interesting is Lactobacillus lactis actually inhibits the activity of dipeptyl peptidase. So therefore, there's this regulatory function going on, and you have a cross section of strains. You have thousands of different strains, and they all have certain roles that they play. But you have some that do one action and others that do the other action. And what you're supposed to have is enough of them, and they're talking to each other so that they know what to do and who gets to win. So in the short term, if you had somebody with gluten issues, you might want to either get the enzyme or try them with bacteria with some of these strains and avoid Lactobacillus lactis. But to understand sort of the totality of what we're supposed to do, I think it's pretty obvious we've got some regulatory function going on there in the gut with all the bacteria strains. So we kind of need all of the bacteria strains to have it regulated properly. Now, there is hope for people with allergies. I just put this in here because I think it's a really cool study. It's 56 children with peanut allergies, and what they did is half the group got, a very small amount of peanut every day. They were trying to increase their resistance, and half of the group got the bacteria strain Lactobacillus rhamnosus, and that number and letter thing after it, that's just the specific strain they used. And after they did this for a bit of time, they found that 89.7% of the experimental group were non-reactive versus 7.1% of the placebo group. That's a huge, huge difference. And what they also found is that the experimental group stayed desensitized for up to 2 to 5 weeks. So they are starting to get some pieces of the puzzle, and this could be really good information that's going to help kids with the anaphylactic nut allergies. So what's happening with our gut? So many people think they don't have yeast problems or digestive issues. They think they don't have a gut issue. But the truth is, you have a health issue, you have a gut issue. And the other truth is, your gut is different from the person next to you, and that is why you don't have the same health issue. And this makes it very confusing and very hard to prove exactly what's happening because we're all so different. And there's a number of factors that, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because there's a lot of research behind all of these. But this is what we know so far: is that when you're breastfed and vaginally delivered, you have a better start with gut bacteria than if you're bottle fed and cesarean. However, we also now know, and this is relatively new, that the condition of the mother's gut bacteria during and after pregnancy can also affect the outcome for the infant, because the mother's gut bacteria is traveling to the baby in the womb, and the mother's gut bacteria is also traveling through the lymph system to the breast milk. Yes?
You were cutting in and out, and then we lost you for a while there. So, wonder if you can back up a slide.
What slide?
We completely lost. I think this is the one you're on, right there. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Can everybody hear Lorene now? Oh my God, this is so interesting. Okay, sorry, it could have just been me.
They can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have to go over this again?
No. Okay, I apologize.
Okay, that's all right. I'm glad you're on top of it. Thank you. Not a problem. Okay, I'll go back to where I was. Okay, so what this condition of the mother's gut bacteria during and after pregnancy means is that if the mother doesn't have ideal gut bacteria, she can't pass it on to the baby. Now, they also know that food fed to the baby during the first 2 years of life can make a difference too. So, good foods that help grow good bacteria are important. And this can also help babies who maybe don't have the best start, whether they're bottle fed or cesarean, or maybe it's because of the mother's gut bacteria. This can help them catch up. But if they're not fed good food that helps their bacteria grow, then they end up still behind the 8 ball. And even babies who are breastfed and vaginally delivered, if they don't get the right foods, that's going to set them back as well too. We also know that the quality and diversity of the diet is very critical. So that means you need to eat a variety of different foods. They have to be good quality foods with lots of prebiotics in them to feed your residential bacteria. You also want to consume fermented foods and things like that because they help do the work of your like if you don't have enough residential bacteria, then the bacteria in the fermented foods can help you out. And so we have our diets are kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't have a lot of variety in them. We tend to only maybe eat 15 different foods a week, the average person. So that makes a huge difference. Also, overeating has a negative effect. So they've actually done studies of lean people and found that even one day of overeating depletes their gut bacteria. The good news is, of course, they stop overeating, they recover, and they get back what they have had lost. Exposure to bad bacteria is very important to developing a healthy gut. So we're too clean. We don't flush our toilets when we go into a public washroom anymore, and we don't touch the taps anymore. And we were actually getting some good bad bacteria exposure that helps our good gut bacteria be fit and healthy. So it needs to stay strong, and it needs to develop and learn, and it can't do this if it's never exposed to bad bacteria. And it's true for all these antibacterial products. I always cringe when I see people spraying their hands with Purell in the grocery store before they touch a grocery cart. They should touch the grocery store cart and leave the antibacterial products alone. But we're not getting enough exposure. And this is playing a role in how diverse we are and how healthy our gut bacteria is. And then, of course, there's environmental toxins such as glyphosate and additives. And we are getting more glyphosate because of GMO soy and canola and corn, because they have been genetically modified to be able to take glyphosate. Glyphosate's an herbicide that kills plants, and it's usually used on weeds. Before, they had to be careful not to spray the plant because they'd killed the plant. But now they've genetically modified some of these plants so they can be sprayed and they don't get killed. So now we're getting glyphosate residue on our plants. Plus, for some grains, including wheat, they like to spray glyphosate onto the grain 2 weeks before it's harvested as a means of getting a uniform. So they basically are killing it 2 weeks before it's harvested, and then they harvest it and they're all the same because they're all dead, and then they grind that into flour. So we're getting glyphosate residue on our grains. And again, not if you have organic. This is why, we should really encourage people to have organic grains. But so we're getting more of this, and glyphosate can harm our gut bacteria because the gut bacteria, we don't have this pathway, but gut bacteria shares a pathway with plants, and this is what glyphosate does. It disrupts this pathway that's in the plants, and that's why the plant dies. Well, they can disrupt the same pathway in our gut bacteria. Stress is a big factor. Stress depletes good bacteria and allows more dysbiosis. Antibiotics is just a huge, there's so much research going on about what happens when there's antibiotic use, and it's quite startling. But the good news is they've also done research that shows that when you take probiotics with antibiotics, you actually can improve the negative effects of the antibiotics. So for whatever reason, antibiotics kill both bad and good bacteria, but the bad bacteria seems to be able to recover faster than the good bacteria, which is why you end up having more dysbiosis after a course of antibiotics. But what they've found is that when you take probiotics with your antibiotics and then for another 2 weeks after, you actually don't give the bad bacteria that advantage. So again, because they're studying this, we're learning things that help counter that. Other drugs can also cause problems like corticosteroids, like prednisone or birth control pills. They can actually damage the gut lining, which of course is the home of the good bacteria, and cause problems. Junk food and alcohol, wine and unpasteurized beer are okay because they actually are bringing organisms to the table as long as they're not in excess. But hard liquor and things like that do not help. And junk food, they've done studies where they measure people's colon bacteria on 2 or 3 weeks of junk food and see them lose substantial amounts of good bacteria. And this is, of course, they're doing this with healthy people, not people who already have an issue. So if it's doing it to healthy people, you can imagine what it does to people who aren't so healthy. So again, just adjusting the quality of the food and the diet can make a huge difference. Too much exercise or too little can also deplete gut bacteria. Lack of sleep or poor quality sleep, and it only takes one night when they can notice a difference. And again, if you make up the sleep, you can make it back, but it's something that people should consider because there's people out there who chronically undersleep. And then radiation exposure of any kind, so whether it's x-rays or airline flights, this is also very problematic for our gut bacteria. So what you can see is that each of us is going to have some combination of these factors. There isn't anybody out there that doesn't have some stress or, maybe isn't sleeping as well or whatever, even if they eat perfectly and, they're not taking any drugs. But and then if we're looking at our client base, they tend to have a lot more of these factors. And it's whatever this combination of factors is going to determine what our gut problem is and what issues we will develop. And just one thing about genetics and genes, 95% of our gene expression is determined by our gut bacteria. So again, it's even having an influence on our DNA. And our problem is, as practitioners, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about ourselves or our clients, we don't know what any one person is missing in terms of gut bacteria. We don't know what strains they're missing, and we don't even know if the person ever had them in the first place. So it's a bit of a conundrum. Someday, researchers may know what we need and are supposed to have. They may develop a test that determines what we're missing. And they may even develop specific strategies with good bacteria strains to treat specific conditions. I can tell you right now, that's happening right now. They're already doing that, even though they don't know what we're supposed to have, and they don't have a test to tell us what we're missing. They know categories. They can test us now for categories, but not for specific strains yet. So here's the big catch-22. When it comes to food, often the food that we need to help us with our gut is the food we can't digest. So I'll use dairy as an example. So dairy has two really great foods for gut bacteria. They have lactose, which the lactobacillus bacteria loves. They have a prebiotic called GOS, which the bifidus bacteria loves. So here you have a food that if you had those strains, you could digest it. And the way to get those strains and develop those strains and develop more of those strains is to eat the food that they love, but you can't eat the food they love because you can't digest it. So that's a bit of a catch-22. We have the same thing with wheat, right? The bifidus bacteria loves the resistant starch, but you can't digest the wheat, so because you don't have the bifidus bacteria that necessarily will help you digest the wheat, and so it's a catch-22. Grains are, by the way, a favorite food for bifidobacteria. And some people have issues with legumes, and these are also good prebiotics, and certain fruits and vegetables that are prebiotics. Anybody who does well on the FODMAPs diet, that's their issue. Again, so the foods they need that are going to help them, they can't digest because they don't have the bacteria strains to digest the foods that they need. So we need to understand these food issues. And what we have to do is choose appropriate substitutes for clients so that in the short term, they get some help and it starts the process. And then what we can do is use these foods they can't digest as a test to see how kind of progress they're making. Because if they can eventually digest this, then they may resolve their gut issues because they've built up those bacteria that they're missing that are causing them the food problems. And on that note, I'd really like Marina to tell her story because it's quite a good one. And so Marina's had a lot of food issues over the years, and she's been working very hard on her gut. So Marina, if you could just quickly tell them, you know, sort of what you couldn't digest before and where you are at now and how you kind of got there, that would be really great.
Okay, thank you, Lorene. It seems like when Lorene talks and has all this wonderful information, which I learned a lot from her, it feels like all that information is telling my story, especially when she talks about susceptibility to disease and immune and all that. I've had digestive issues.
Marina, you're cutting out. Marina?
Yes?
You're cutting out. Marina?
Yeah, hear me? Yes. Hello?
You're cutting out. Okay, keep going.
Okay, can you hear me a little bit? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, okay, sorry. So I'm not sure how much everybody caught of this.
We heard that this sort of mirrors your story.
Yeah, and I've had digestive issues my entire life, and from the nausea and throwing up and gas and bloating, and I would be going home from school doubled over in pain, and it was a regular thing for me to be in pain every day, even as a child, and it just kept getting worse as I grew older. Didn't know what was the problem. As I got much older, I heard about dairy, and I realized that when I eat ice cream or something that I'm in a lot of pain, so I stopped the dairy. It got a little better, but I still had digestive issues. Then I was getting fed up of so many tests and everything, and I tried to research it myself. And I heard about celiac, and I seemed to have all the symptoms of celiac with the hormone imbalance and the thyroid issues and everything like that. And so I got off the gluten because I also had cancer twice. So that must have, as Lorene was saying, it makes you susceptible. So anyway, I got off the gluten, and there was a huge difference. Like I felt a huge difference as far as not being bloated and gassy every day. But I realized I still had trouble digesting things, and did not realize that just taking the food off was not enough. So I couldn't digest nuts or seeds. I couldn't digest raw foods. I couldn't digest legumes. It was getting to a point where my digestive issues were going to be endless. I didn't know how to proceed. When I met Lorene, she introduced me to a lot of all about the good bacteria, and introduced me to a lot of things that I can do to help myself. We started out, I did all kinds of probiotics and digestive enzymes and glutamine and things to heal my gut. And then we started out where Lorene was talking about kefir and how good it was, and I couldn't digest dairy, but she started me out with coconut kefir, and I loved that, and I noticed a difference right away. And then I was able to progress from coconut kefir to goat kefir, which she taught me how to make, and I make myself, and I have every day. And now I'm able, like I've done a lot of things, and then I was afraid of the food that I couldn't digest. And one day she said to me, "Well, if it was me, I would try it." And I did, and I had brought macadamia nuts from Hawaii, and she let me try. She said, "I think I would try it." So I did, and I was so surprised because I didn't react. And now I'm able to, make a long story short, I'm able to digest nuts and seeds, raw foods, legumes, and now I have all kinds of cheeses. I thought it was only raw cow cheese, but lately I've been able to eat just regular cow cheese. And goat cheese, and which is amazing. And occasionally I have goat butter. It gives me a little bit of a problem, but I'm working on that, and it's an ongoing thing. So thank you, Lorene. That's my story.
Well, I think it's a fabulous story, and of course, I didn't know you could now do the regular cow cheese, so that's even more improvement. But this is what I mean, that we started her with the coconut kefir so that she could get all those strains of good bacteria, and I gave her, if you're wondering how she got the coconut kefir, I gave her the grains, and so she was making that. That's a little bit more difficult to do than doing goat kefir, and then she took it on herself to do the goat kefir, and she just keeps making progress. But this is because she learned the appropriate substitutes and then used those to kind of make up for what she couldn't do with the foods that would probably have, if she could digest them, would be better for her. And then it allowed her to build up. And I just think it's an amazing story. And I know quite a number of people who've had this experience. And so this is kind of where we need to be with our clients, is that we need to sort of find the other foods, since they can't digest these foods now, to find the other foods that could be bringing some of the same things to the table, and then that allows them to build up, and over time they may be able to have these other foods that they can't digest now. Okay, so here's just some snippet. There's so many things you can do for gut, it's not funny. This is just a snippet. So things like vitamin A, C, and D help promote the production of the brush border enzymes, and they communicate with gut bacteria, that the vitamins do. They actually work together. So these vitamins in particular help promote gut bacteria, but gut bacteria also helps promote absorption of these nutrients into the body, which is kind of cool. Omega-3 and vitamin D help promote IL-10, which is that anti-inflammatory cytokine. Of course, probiotics and fermented foods are helpful for restoring immune tolerance and protecting the gut lining and preventing leaky gut. Prebiotics help us grow our own residential bacteria. Butyrate, you can buy it as a supplement. It's also in butter. That's the short chain fatty acid that promotes T regulatory cells. And of course, glutamine, you all know about glutamine. It helps repair the gut lining. The important thing to remember is we need more strategies now. We can't get sidetracked about the food. And so removing the food's not going to fix the gut. We need to actively look at their diet, their lifestyle, and what nutrients and foods they might be missing, and try to come up with a strategy that puts some of those things in there as they are now. It's going to be a trial and error approach, and there's, again, if Marina had more time, she could tell you all about the trial and error that she did. And we have to work around the food sensitivities and intolerances and allergies. But what we really need to do is teach the client what we're trying to accomplish, so that they are okay with the trial and error approach, and they will be more forthcoming about what's working for them or not. And just some final thoughts here. Healing the gut does take time. So you need to think of a protocol as a progression towards a goal. When Marina tells her story, we're talking, this happened over a 2 or 3 year period. It didn't happen over a few months. So it could take months, it could take years. It's going to depend on the individual. And the client has to be prepared for this. But believe me, if it comes to trying to get foods that they can digest back, and not being so, afraid of food, a lot of people are willing to do this. And your goal should be to create a livable protocol for them that will help sustain them through the process and keep them progressing towards their goal. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm just going to quickly talk about the Healthy Gut, and then I'll take your questions. So I started the Healthy Gut program because I was seeing all this information. There was nowhere to get it from. And I wanted to create an ongoing resource for people so that they could have access to this new information, because so much is coming out so fast and it's going to change and help us in many ways, but we need to know it. And so this is a program that has 8 modules, and it's starting on February 14th. It's over 32 hours of content. It discusses all the conditions related to health, to gut health. So it's not just about the intestinal issues. It's about heart disease and osteoporosis and diabetes and autism and allergies and everything you can think of, because they're all related to gut health. There's so many connections that are being made now. Food allergy and food intolerance, of course, are discussed. There's a whole module on foods for the gut. There's a whole module on supplements for the gut, including spec sheets from several of the supplement companies. We discuss case studies, and there's a whole lifestyle section that goes on about meditating and cancer and stress and sleep and exercise, all related to gut health. I include business considerations because, as far as I'm concerned, you're doing this as a business, and it's very important that you know how to take this information and grow your business with it, because what else is it for? How do we help people if you don't get the information out there? And it's designed to be a permanent resource. So once you're in forever. So that means you get invited to all future webinars, and there's webinars throughout the program as well. And you also have a resource. You can ask questions all you like ongoing, and it's been a really good experience for me, and I know that the members have been really enjoyed it as well, because it's been a very supportive program. It also includes a lot of tools. There's a new assessment and symptomatology form. There's a strains chart, so it says what the conditions are and some of the strains that might be helpful for it. Plus, there's a lot of info about strains throughout the whole program. There's a new candidiasis dysbiosis protocol and ebook. There's a leaky gut protocol and ebook. There's all kinds of menu plans and recipes so that you can use that as a resource if you're looking for things for clients. All the modules have references. There's a big reference list for each module. There's transcripts. There's a quiz if you want to do that for upgrading, and you get a certificate when you complete the course. There's other tools and more. I also created this client gut health avatar, which is just my name for this big in-depth questionnaire. I would never use this at the beginning when seeing a client. It's quite in-depth, but if you're really trying to get into their history about why they might have gut health issues, you can use this, and it's will sort of show the pattern of kind of how they got off the rails, especially once you understand all the factors involved. There's a fabulous community Facebook page. The group is so good and so supportive. Plus, for the first time, I've done a complete done for you program as part of the Healthy Gut. Because then this has been because members have asked for this. And so this is giving you all the documents that you want that you can customize as your own, with your name and your photo and your website and everything. It includes 4 different lead magnets. There's pictures of 3 of them on this slide. There's 2 email sales funnel. There's a sales page. There's PowerPoints to help you run your own program, whether you want to do it live or online. There's handouts for that you can give out to clients for different topics. There's blog posts and extra recipes, so this will save you time so that you can connect with your audience and grow your email list. There's a candidiasis dysbiosis questionnaire. There's 5 different 21-day menu plans. Again, if you look at the picture there, you can see sort of the graphics that they have, and that's the cover of one of them. So they are all designed because you often have clients who are on different types of diets come to you. So you might have a client who's on paleo, or you might have a client who's on ketogenics or FODMAPs. There's a regular one, of course, for the majority of people. There's a vegan one. And so they're already designed with the gut health foods in them, so that especially for ketogenics, which is really complicated, you don't have to do it, and you can use it as a teaching tool, or the client can just follow it if they want. They're really quite in depth. and there's over 130 recipes. And this is just basically a guaranteed way to take your nutrition practice to the next level. So I also have a couple other bonuses that I'm offering right now. Available immediately is a 2-webinar series, The Healing Effect of the Practitioner. And it really discusses what we bring to the table as practitioners, that we actually can create a better environment for our clients that will help them heal in the way that we talk with them, the atmosphere we create in the room that we're in with them together. There's some really good information about how to do that, and I think we shouldn't underestimate what we bring to the table. And there's also going to be 4 live Q&A sessions throughout the modules, because I just find that the live interaction is very helpful, and we get a lot of great questions, a lot of things going on. By the way, you don't have to do this one module at a time and follow along with the schedule. I do that because some people like that. Once you are in the program, you can do these modules anytime you want. You have access forever, so there's no time limits on this. And then one final bonus for the first 10 people who sign up, a half-hour one-on-one session with me. I love talking to you guys. I love helping in any way I can. And so you can access this anytime now, a year from now, 2 years from now, it doesn't matter to me. And so that's basically the program. I really hope that, oh, sorry, I forgot the price. I was just going to skip this part. So the price is $8.97, or you can have 4 easy pays of $237, which are taken out every 2 weeks. This is the early bird price, and it ends February 9th. Okay, so now I really hope that you join me. And on that note, I will come out of screen share, and I will take any questions that you have. All right. Am I back? I don't see me. Turn off. No, don't end this event. Turn on camera. There I am. Okay. So Kara's asking, will this be offered at any other date? It's offered in usually twice a year. Okay. So does anybody have any questions with the material I presented? I would be happy to take your questions. I'm just kind of scrolling through here. Please be careful with the store-bought coconut kefir. Make sure it's made from kefir grains. Just ask them if they make it from kefir grains, because there are kefirs out there that are only made with 4 strains of good bacteria, and you want the one from kefir grains because they're made from 32 strains of good bacteria and yeast. Okay, just checking. Mary's asking, what could you substitute if you can't eat grains? Okay, so for example, for the resistant starch, you've got potatoes, you've got corn, you've got sweet potatoes, you've got legumes. There is even a little bit of resistant starch in nuts and seeds, but not a lot. So I'd say your big one, the biggest, best substitute for something like wheat would be potatoes. And then second, I would say legumes. And then third, I would say sweet potatoes. So you do have some options there. Okay. Michelle's asking, what pathway goes, how does stress create dysbiosis? It's part of the brain-gut connection, and it has to do with the fight or flight response sort of shutting down the system temporarily, and in doing that, it limits some of the bacteria. The other question I saw, it sort of escaped me here. How does overeating have a negative effect on gut health? It's because the bacteria needs to have the food come in at a certain level, and in having it come in a certain level, it can digest it properly and it gets fed. And if too much food comes in, it's overwhelming the system and it can't digest all that and it doesn't get fed properly. So this is what they're finding. And again, it's new research, so it'll be interesting to see how they what they find out more. Okay, I'm just looking for other questions here. All right. Dawn asks if there's a replay. Yes, there is. Roxana wants to know if the slides will be sent out. I can send them out. Joanne is asking, is wheat the best source of resistant starch, or are other grains that can supply the same thing? This is a big question. So what we know now is that you can't, if we look at our ancestors and we look at grains, you'll see that every culture had 2 or 3 different grains, and each grain helps to grow different strains of bacteria. So while wheat is a really good food for resistant starch, it's not the only food. So other grains they do have resistant starch, but it's not identical to wheat. But it might be all they can do, so that's okay. And if you have a cross section of what they can do, then you might be compensating for the fact they can't do wheat. So this is what I'm saying about with the trial and error. You have to kind of work with it. Tina's saying she can't find coconut kefir. The easiest way, one of the things I did in the Done For You program is I included references from where you can get the kefir grains and a recipe for coconut kefir, because this is a common problem, Tina. And it's so easy to make. It is the easiest thing in the world to make. And so I decided I would stick it into the Done For You program so that if you want to recommend this to a client, you have the recipe. I even have a recipe in there of how to make your own coconut milk, which is delicious, so much better than what you can buy. And so, yes. What do you think of the effect of coffee on gut bacteria? Actually, one of the blog posts is going to be about that, because it's not ideal. Let's just put it that way. I don't have all the details with me off the top of my head, but there's been some really interesting research about coffee and good bacteria, and it's not that you can't drink any coffee. It's that if you drink too much, it's not very good. Sheila wants to know, is there a reference for celiacs and sourdough bread? If you could email me, Sheila, I could find it for you and send it to you. And my email address is LORENESAURO at rogers.com. Okay, so just email me, I'll find that for you. Sarah's asking, regarding the young mice exposed to bacteria, did they gain immune cells from exposure to harmful bacteria, or was it exposure to healthy bacteria? No, they gave them healthy bacteria. So they re-inoculated them with good bacteria. If consistently elevated levels of zonulin are associated with gluten consumption, then how can it ever be safe? Wait, come back to your question. How can it ever be safe to state that in a state where it is not fermented? Okay, so that information about gluten and elevating zonulin levels has to be understood in that the elevated zonulin levels are not in connection with the assumption of consumption of gluten, because people who do not have celiac disease do not have elevated zonulin levels, and they eat gluten all the time. The information about the gluten or the gliadin molecule locking onto the CXCR3 receptor, which releases zonulin, that gliadin molecule, why am I staring at the questions? I should be staring at the camera. That gliadin molecule has to actually get at that receptor, and it has to get past the good bacteria in order to cause that zonulin reaction. So this is going to happen in people who have insufficient gut bacteria and are not breaking down that gluten molecule, because you shouldn't have a gliadin molecule. It should be completely digested into single amino acids if it's digested properly. So I hope that explains it. And I lost some questions here. No, I didn't. Okay. Farah is asking, how about rice? Rice has resistant starch too. And by the way, this is a really interesting piece of information. when you cook rice or cook wheat or pasta or whatever, and it can even be white rice and white wheat, and it has resistant starch in it. And then when it cools, the resistant starch goes higher. And if you reheat it, the resistant starch goes even higher. So this explains why traditionally people have reheated. So rice has been cooked ahead of time for years. Pasta has been cooked ahead of time for years. So this could be why they did that. They didn't know they were doing it for this reason, but that's a traditional cooking technique, to cook it ahead of time and then reheat it just before serving. But it really increases the resistant starch. I think that's kind of cool. Okay, so Sarah's asking, if treating a child with age of 4, is there less hope for her microbiome to be restored after being born C-section and breasted by a mom with poor intestinal flora? Breastfed, I'm sure think that's supposed to say. We don't know. Right now, they know that the age is 2, but I think what they're going to find, because they make assumptions based on what they know now, and then they find out that there's even more benefits and more resiliency. I think that they're going to find out that there's a bigger window for children than they think right now. I would still try. And what they need is GOS. GOS is a type of prebiotic. It helps bifidus bacteria grow more efficiently and effectively than FOS, and it's found in dairy products, and it's found in legumes to a lesser degree. You can also buy a supplement from Genestra, I believe, that has the GOS in it as well. And so they need that. And I would also get them a probiotic that has Bifidus infantis in it. The New Roots herbal ones, and they have one for children, would be a really good one to try. And then you just work with the child, and usually there's something you're trying to correct, and you just see how they can progress. Kathy's saying she was in the first Healthy Gut program. It was fabulous and useful. Thank you, Kathy, and it's good to see you. Okay, so hopefully that answered your question. Marina's put the link up for the program if you're interested. Lori's asking, is water kefir similar quality to coconut or and milk kefirs? Okay, so let's first explain that coconut kefir is using milk kefir grains to make coconut kefir. So you make coconut kefir with coconut milk. It's not as ideal. Coconut does not contain the food that the grains like, because they like carbohydrates, and coconut milk doesn't. But it has the 32 strains, which is what you're looking for. And water kefir only has 9. So it's still good, but it's not nearly as good as coconut, either the coconut or milk kefirs. Kim says, how do you get the done for you if you've already done this program? I will be sending out a special email for everybody who's already in the Healthy Gut program to allow them to get the done for you. I really feel that people need to have the information to work with the done for you materials. And so that's why it's now coming as part of the program. But yes, it's going to be ready on February 7th, and I'm going to send out an email for all the people who've already done the program to get it. Denise says, can you quickly explain how the program works? There's a series of online videos that you watch in your own time. Plus, there's some live components that are scheduled. And if you sign up for the program, you'll when you get into the introduction page, you'll see the schedule for the live webinars, and they get recorded, and you can listen to them later if you can't attend live. So there's no way to miss anything. And it's 8 modules, so there's one a week. But most people, I have always a group who will follow along once every week, and they'll get it done in the 8 weeks. But the vast majority of people do it on their own time. So whatever, right, Marina? How long did it take you? A year? So again, everybody's different. I've got some people who are still working on it from the very first Healthy Gut. So there's no rush, and every time it's updated. So it doesn't matter what you do; you're always up to date when you do it. And once you've done it, I tell you whenever I add something, I send out an email saying when it's updated. Lisa says, I was taught in school that rice breeds bacteria quickly. What? Breeds bacteria once cooked, and we should not be eating rice that is more than a day old. Would you say that bacteria that builds up on the rice is actually beneficial? Some is, some isn't. Depends on storage techniques. When you ferment a grain, you can ferment them cooked. The problem with rice is that when you ferment, you usually soak it in water with either salt or some type of starter. It could be whey from yogurt, or it could be sauerkraut juice or something like that, and that inhibits bad bacteria. But when you soak rice in water, it gets plumper and softer and gooier. But I think what we're talking about here is you cook it in the morning and you reheat it in the evening, and you'll be fine. Any bacteria spores that are there will be killed, and if it's been kept in the refrigerator, there will be very, very little. So that's basically what I would say you would do. Tina's asking, so if your client shows casein, gluten, gliadin intolerance based on food IgG blood test, would you remove, reinoculate biocultured foods, probiotics, and reintroduce sourdough, wheat grains, and later raw dairy while healing the gut? Yes. But I would even try them on sourdough before I even did that, just to see if they don't react. They might be able to have the sourdough right away. And the same with the raw, like the only raw dairy we can get, that unless you have a raw milkman that is handy to you, is the raw milk cheddars. So it's a good test to see how they react, and hopefully they know what their reaction is. And would that allow for strengthening of the immune tolerance? So it would depend on how many different things you did. So the problem with regaining immune tolerance is you've got to do a number of strategies that both repair the gut lining, or restore the the bacteria levels at both the residential. You can use probiotics and fermented foods. They're not going to help you grow good bacteria. Well, I shouldn't say that. Fermented foods will help you because they contain prebiotics, but probiotics do not help you grow new gut bacteria. They just help you while you take them. So it's like I said, it's a trial and error thing, and you got to try a number of strategies. Something else that really helps for immune tolerance is plant sterols, which you can also buy as a supplement as well. Kara's asking, what is your opinion on probiotic enemas for adults and children for reinoculation? The problem with the enemas is you put it in there and then they come flooding back out again. So I don't think it's a bad thing, but probiotics do not colonize. This is why they are doing these fecal transplants, because you're actually transplanting the bacteria into their gut, and this is actually going to stay because it's real residential bacteria. Okay. Mary says, thank you for letting us have access to the done for you. My pleasure. Kim says, thanks. Denise says, I'm signing up. Thanks.
Can everybody?
Sorry, what'd you say? Rena? You're cutting in and out. And Tina says, okay, great. I did that. Sourdough double fermented. Yeah, you can do that as well. If they're still having a reaction, then do what you were suggesting and then try it again. Diana says, always great. I'm still doing the last program. Looking forward for getting the done for you. Thanks, Diana. Roxana says, what are your thoughts on fiber and gut health? Well, the prebiotics that we talk about are generally fiber. There are prebiotics that are phytonutrients, but a lot of the fibers that are in different foods are all prebiotic and help feed the good bacteria. So fiber is great. Again, you've got that catch-22. If they don't have enough of the bacteria that can break down the fiber, they may not be getting the benefit of the fiber, and it may cause a reaction. But in general, we do want to recommend fiber for gut health. All right. Is that the last of the questions? Those were good questions. Everybody asked very, very good questions. So I'll just wait a couple of minutes to see if there's any more questions. And if not, then I really thank you guys for coming. This has been great. I'm glad the technology on my side hung in there. Marina, I think we know something about your new place now. That the internet connection is not that great.
Yeah, the technology is not that great on this side. I had a amazing
Yeah.
provider before.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are good, if everybody's good, thank you so much for coming. And I hope I see you online soon. Thank you, Rebecca. She said excellent webinar. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I will talk to you the next time I see you online. All right. Thank you very much. And everybody have a good night.
Bye, everyone.